Professor Stark, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Vice-Chancellor Nebutalu, members of Council, members of the academic and administrative staff of the university. But most importantly, good afternoon to the graduates and to your families. Today is about you, it's about a celebration. I am immensely honored to be here, immensely honored to be in front of you, and I'm going to try and talk directly to you. I hope this inspires you in some way. The milestone that you've achieved today is immense. It's something to be tremendously proud of. I'm a business person, as Professor Stark alluded to. I run an organization called Accelerate Cape Town. I work with business leaders, I work with public sector, but for the most part, it's around policies, it's around practices, around growing the economy. Critically importantly, growing an inclusive economy. But if any of you were to ask me what my actual job is, so forget about what my job title is, but what my actual job is, I would say to you, it's one word, or two words actually, I guess. It's about restoring hope. And it's not just hope out in the streets, it's about restoring hope in the boardrooms of South Africa. It's about restoring hope and getting people to invest and to grow this economy. So that, for me, is what I want to talk about today. Now, I consider myself to be a fairly regular person who has been very, very fortunate over the last several years to have some tremendous opportunities in my life. I'd like to tell you today about some people who've played a role in me standing here today. And hopefully, for the graduates, some of this will resonate with you on your own journeys to get to where you are. 27 years ago, I would not have considered myself likely to be standing at a graduation ceremony, let alone to be speaking at a graduation ceremony. I had recently, and this is confession time for me, I had recently failed at my first attempt at university. I was at University of Cape Town, and my parents couldn't afford the fees, and my mother didn't finish school, didn't go on beyond that. My father didn't finish school. And as a young man who was battling, I looked at this and thought, I need to step out. I need to go and find my own job. I need to find income. And that's what I did 27 years ago. So standing here today in itself is nothing short of a miracle. And I say that because I made some significant mistakes. There were a few things, however, that changed that trajectory for me. And I want to speak about them and then hopefully get some sort of conversation, if you like, that goes forward, taken forward after today. Three factors. Firstly, the absolutely committed and dedicated friendship of two people who really mean the world to me. Professor Kurt April is now at the Graduate School of Business at the University of Cape Town. His wife, Mandy, I know them very well. These people were absolute lifesavers to me. They inspired me. These are two people who themselves have overcome the ravages of a past devastated by Group Areas Act, devastated by forced removals, devastated by poverty, and they inspired me. So that was the first thing, very dedicated life of good friends. The second one, for me, was a very deep spiritual awakening, a personal journey, spiritual change. So that certainly helped in my life. And then the third one, which I hope all of the graduates here will be very aware of, is personal hard work. It took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of work, but those three things changed the trajectory of my life, and it's something that I think, well, hopefully all of you will experience as well. Now, in preparing for today and reflecting on it, it struck me that my own journey, my own new beginning, if you like, changed and started in 1994, which commences with the rebirth of South Africa. It commences with this fantastic thing that we call democratic South Africa. And I think there's a lot to be said for that synergy, if you like. When I went back to university, I enrolled in a business science degree. So like yourselves, I'm a business graduate. And I took on what for me was my personal Everest. And I don't know how many of you would see this the same way, but I took on mathematics. And Maths 105 at UCT back in the day was absolutely legendary. It was a massive hurdle to overcome, even for the bright students, let alone for people like myself. And that was a real issue for me. I'd been out of formal education for a while. That I'm able to stand here today is largely due to the dedication of one man that I ran into in that maths lecture in 1995. And hopefully you will recognize some of the characteristics that I'm going to talk about today in similar people that you've had at this university. Even more than that, I hope, though, that you will become the sort of person who wants to actually impact those around them, that wants to do more than simply get ahead, but actually looks at it and says, wow, I'm going to make a contribution. Imagine the situation. I was 27 at the time, right? So I was 8 or 9 years older than pretty much everyone else in the class, except the lecturer himself. I sat in the very front row, and if I could get it, I sat in the very front desk in the front row because I wanted to take in as much as I could. I'm frequently reminded by my colleagues and former classmates that I was the old guy in the front of the class. And that, unfortunately, hasn't changed. I'm now the old guy on the stage. But every single Monday morning, my lecturer would come up to me and say to me, "Chris, where is your tutorial? Give it to me." Very unusual in a university situation for a lecturer to take a personal interest in an individual student. But every Monday morning he would take it away from me, and every Tuesday morning he'd bring it back. And it would have copious amounts of red pen, copious amounts of notes explaining to me what I'd done wrong, and frankly, often horribly wrong in maths. I'd then spend Tuesday afternoons, Wednesday afternoons, often Thursdays and Fridays, in my lecturer's class, in his office rather, and going through problems that I still hadn't mastered. For those of you that are old enough to remember green chalkboards, I got along very, very well with them over that entire year. The thing that struck me is that he never turned me away. He was always willing to help me. He was always willing to help this fairly desperate young man at the time who needed to overcome his personal shortcomings to take his life forward. And for me, that speaks to a number of things. Why am I, and I suppose the first question you might be asking is, why am I telling you this? For me, it demonstrates the values that South Africa needs today. It demonstrates integrity. It demonstrates a desire to contribute to the lives not just of ourselves but of others. It demonstrates a willingness to go the proverbial extra mile. It speaks of courage, in my case to admit my faults, to seek to change, and then to volhard, to actually push through the very difficult times. It also speaks to humility, and it speaks to something else, a generosity of spirit, which often in today's society is all too lacking. Those are the same values that I read about in an article about a week and a half ago. I was transiting through Sydney Airport. Professor Stark has mentioned the fact that I lived in Australia. I got back on Wednesday night, so I'm a little bit jet lagged. So anything I say, I'll blame on jet lag. But I read an article by Professor Sizwe Mabizela, who's the current Vice-Chancellor of Rhodes University, which he spoke at a recent graduation ceremony. Now, Professor Mabizela, to me, is Sizwe. He was my maths lecturer in 1995. And I've followed his career vicariously and from a distance for the last 20 years. And I think he continues to demonstrate those values that I've just mentioned. He coached me, he mentored me, he inspired me 20 years ago. And he continues, I think, to demonstrate the sorts of values that are needed to take South Africa forward, to achieve the goals that organizations like mine that Accelerate Cape Town actually exist to achieve. Robust, high and inclusive growth, where everyone has a stake in the future of South Africa. High social mobility, no matter where you come from, so that the vagaries of birth can be overcome through social inclusion, through economic growth. And where what I call the lethal cocktail of unemployment, poverty, and inequality can be overcome once and for all, because for us, those challenges are things that put South Africa on the knife edge, and we need to make sure we can overcome them. And when I hear Professor Mabizela speaking, or when I read his address last week, a couple of things struck me, and I'm going to read them to make sure that I use the exact words rather than misquote him. The noble qualities and values of personal integrity, honesty, humility, compassion, respect for each other, fairness, forgiveness, empathy, selfless dedication, and willingness to put others first, that was so beautifully exemplified by former President Nelson Mandela, have given way to venality, a complete lack of integrity, moral decadence, profligacy, rampant corruption, deceit, and duplicity. Professor Mabizela went on to say, South Africa has lost its moral compass. By voting in people who have no sense of right and wrong, just and unjust, fair and unfair, ethical and unethical, to positions of power, crass materialism has become the fashion statement for the political elite. Those are heavy words. Those are not words that I included in today's address lightly. Unfortunately, and I think fairly regrettably, I think Sizwe was right. I can't see any other rational explanation for how, as a South Africa, we've had 20 years of hope deferred, for a country seemingly mired in the ravages of an apartheid past. Now let me be very clear. There are absolutely no excuses for that past. It's morally, ethically, and in every other way reprehensible, and can never ever be defended, it can never ever be justified. But the thing that struck me with Sizwe's address 2 weeks ago was that the trajectory of the political elite that he's referring to is equally unjustifiable. Increasing inequality, rampant unemployment, greed, corruption, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. By some accounts, 30 billion rand in every single one of the last 3 or 4 years. It's just something that I could not leave out. We need to address this. And I believe, and I'm going to paraphrase former President Mandela, if they do to you what the apartheid government did to you, then you should do to them what you did to the apartheid government. The time for change, and I'm speaking to the graduates, is now. We cannot allow South Africa to go forward by accepting mediocrity anymore. However, and this is where it improves, don't worry. I spoke about hope, and I think there are massive reasons in South Africa to hope. South Africa today is an infinitely better country than it was 25 years ago. Our constitution has withstood significant challenges. We all know what those challenges are. The institutionalized racism of the past has been overcome. Whilst I've alluded to the fact that I believe much still needs to get done, there are significant green shoots in this country and this economy that tell me this is the right place to be. Professor Stark referenced the fact that I lived in Australia. I have a young family, right? I chose to come back to South Africa because this is the place. There's an American senator, Rand Paul, who's now standing for the president of America. He last week said that this is going to be the American century. I think he's got it wrong. He's got the right first letter, but this is going to be the African century, and this is the place to be, and there's significant hope, and I'm going to pick on a couple of examples for that. You'll forgive me because I run Accelerate Cape Town. I'm Cape Townian. I believe in Cape Town. There's no question in my mind that we are very well positioned to be the living lab for Africa, a place where we can come, we can bring African challenges, we can find African solutions, and once and for all we can banish this concept of Afro-pessimism. Let me pick on a couple of ideas, a couple of concepts for you. As business people, if I was in your shoes right now, I'd be looking very long, very hard at the Square Kilometre Array, the SKA. The 200 PhDs and postdocs not far from us here doing phenomenal work in maths and science and technology. In fact, recently chatting with Bernie Fanneroff, who runs the SKA, we've just sold technology from the SKA, developed in Cape Town, into NASA. NASA is using African solutions to address world problems. So, reason for hope number one, massive opportunity. Coming out of that, big data. Right? And I'm throwing some examples out, there'll be plenty of others. Big data. By 2020, for the business people in the room, a $1 trillion opportunity. We should be looking at grabbing 20% of that for Cape Town, 20% of that for South Africa. Not far from me, as I was driving in, it struck me that UWC is doing some amazing work. Now, I'm going to pick on the universities, but UWC is doing amazing work in hydrogen fuel cells. In a country crying out for energy security, less than 2 or 3 kilometers away, there's phenomenal work being done in energy storage. Again, massive reason for hope. Professor Nhlapu, who I know well, will verify the fact that on this campus, there's amazing work being done around drones, around satellites, and particularly using them in the agricultural space. Africa has 60% of the world's unused arable land. Vice Chancellor, for me, there's no reason whatsoever why this university in this region shouldn't be playing a leading role in world food security over the next 15, 20, 25 years. Likewise, a very good friend of mine, Professor Kelly Chibali up at UCT, is doing phenomenal work in communicable diseases, HIV, AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis. In fact, probably in the world, he's the closest to a single-dose cure for malaria, on a continent in which 1 million people a year die from malaria. There are massive reasons for hope in this country. I've mentioned a few of them, but imagine if you pulled some of those together, the Square Kilometre Array, big data, the work that's going on here, hydrogen fuel cells, the pharmaceutical opportunity with an industry that's slated to be $45 billion by 2020. Massive reasons for hope. I think that South Africa has work to be done, and I'm looking at the future leaders and workers of the country. But I'm absolutely certain that there's significant hope, and I hope that you feel the same way. Active, engaged, well-trained people who I'm looking at right now are the future of our country. It would be wrong of me to finish without, in some way, asking you to do something, because you're going into business, you'll always have to do something. My challenge to you is to be active citizens, to be agents of change. I hope that you choose to live in Cape Town. If you're not going to live in Cape Town, I hope you at least choose to live in South Africa. But wherever you choose to live in the future, be active in your community. Take a stand. Don't walk across the road. Be the Samaritan. Go and help your neighbor. Because through doing that, you benefit and they benefit. Let me congratulate you again on a magnificent achievement. Today is the culmination of many years of study, and well done to you. Good luck in your careers. But more than that, best wishes for a meaningful life, where you rise up to meet each challenge that you face with integrity and with moral courage, building a better South Africa. We're depending on you. Thank you very much.